Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Wonderful to have you here for the 4th European Literature Night. We're going to do this all in English. On peut le faire en français également. Parce que, Duits laat ik even aan jou.
Das können wir auch machen. Ja.
Yeah? Okay. I think our languages stick to this.
It's probably best we stick to
okay.
English.
Yeah, okay. This is the 4th European Literature Night, and of course, this is not a new initiative because UNIC, which is the network of European cultural institutes, and well, even those cultural institutes who don't have a building participate in this night. And we're very grateful to them because probably you are as fed up with European debates on politics as we are. Better speak about literature tonight, don't you think so?
It's always best to speak about literature. Yeah.
Poetry, literature.
All the other things you can talk about. Literature is by far the best thing to talk about, I think.
And it's not only the UNIC who is organizing this marvelous evening, but also the European Commission in The Hague, who is financially contributing to this initiative. And it's wonderful to know that at the moment, everywhere in Europe, writers, authors, readers are together to celebrate the European literature. It's happening at this moment, the same thing we are doing here in London, in Paris, in Berlin. So we feel a little bit more European, probably, don't you?
Let me think.
Oh, you should say yes.
Okay, of course, I'm feeling very European today.
Okay, good. Are you feeling a little bit more European as well? Yeah. Having this in mind? Okay. Yes. Yes, okay, good. We are very privileged to have 8 European authors here with us tonight. They're here, sitting here on the front row. We will introduce them to you later on. But first, well, what are we going to speak about tonight? What is the theme?
We're going to speak about the last words of Goethe, famous German author. Must be familiar with it. Very concise last words, as last words tend to be very concise. More light, Mehr Licht, Mehr Licht in our language. 9 European writers on the last words of Goethe. They all wrote either an essay or a short story on the theme of tonight.
Isaac Coolin, have you ever been introduced in this way before? You give the answer to my question when you have a microphone. Isaac Coolin, Turkish writer, novelist. She writes also short stories. She has written biographies. And recently her novel, Vaarwel, Istanbul, was published by De Geus Publishing House. De Geus. This book has been translated by Jitske Bruinesse and Irene het Hoofd. Isaac Coolin, may I invite you? And our second guest for this first round is Fabrice Humbert. On va parler avec vous en français, je pense, peut-être en allemand. It's amazing. It's the first Frenchman I met who speaks English and German besides French. Well, this is an exception. It's an exception. It's a really good example of the European atmosphere we have tonight, the European esprit. You are a French novelist. You teach French in a secondary school near Paris, and you published in 2010 The Origin of Violence in Dutch translation. More recently, earlier this year, Scylla's Fortune. It's difficult to pronounce in English. La Fortune de Scylla, je dirais. It has been translated by Marianne Kaas, who is present here as well. Please, Fabrice Humbert, join us. Wonderful to have you here both. In this really nice book, Mehr Licht, you have contributed 2 essays, and actually you wrote both 2 non-fiction texts. Some authors wrote fiction, in an association with the theme of tonight. But you chose both to be a little bit serious about Goethe. You say what kind of a man he is, what he has written. You really made a kind of a study of this scientist and poet as well. Actually, you speak in your text about Goethe as a poet, and you say, well, he has studied Hafiz, the Turkish poet. Does that make Goethe more attractive to you?
Persian, actually.
Yes, Persian.
No, but I was very much surprised when I found out that Goethe has studied Hafiz, read him, influenced by him, and wrote the West-East Divan after the age of 65. That was quite surprising for me. I was taken by surprise. And why I wrote an essay is simply out of a misunderstanding. Writing a story would be much easier for me, but I thought I was expected to write an essay on Mehr Licht.
Well, the best texts always come out of a misunderstanding, probably. I learned from Goethe is to refuse all nationalism.
Yes. In fact, I wrote this essay because I was interested in Goethe. When I was young, I read Die Verführungen des Juges Werthers, The Sufferings of Werthers, and I was in love with this book. I mean, now maybe I would think it is maybe ridiculous, or I don't know,
but then you were probably a little bit younger.
Yes, I was younger. I was probably a romantic young man, and I loved this book, and I was obsessed with this book, and also with the obsession of love, which is in this book. And I can always remember some sentences from this book. So I wanted to speak about Goethe, and I wanted to use also a book which is very useful and interesting for Goethe, and it's a book from Rafik Shami, and Rafik Shami is a Turkish and German writer, and it was very interesting to read this book, coming from a man who loves both cultures, and so for me, with the books from Goethe and this book from Rafik Shami, it was the symbol of Europe. Of
loss, of course, that he wasn't here because it was beautiful. We're going to talk to two people now. The Flemish writer Peter Terry. He published 2 collections of short stories, 5 novels. Monte Carlo is his most recent novel, published just a few days ago. Postmortem was his last book, to critical acclaim. The book before that, The Bewaker, has been translated in, I think, 15 languages now, which is quite a lot. And the Spanish writer Ricardo Menéndez Salmón. He studied philosophy, writes for a number of newspapers in Spain, wrote a travel book, published a collection of short stories, and published quite a lot of novels, 3 of which have been published in Dutch, or have been translated in Dutch, not published in Dutch, of course. He's a Spanish writer. De Schending, The Corrector, and Instort. Could I invite you both to the couch? And Peter, is there a dialogue between the place you come from and the books you write? Because The Bewaker, for example, was a book, quite a universal story. It's not an essentially Flemish story or Belgian story.
No, I don't think any of my books are typically Flemish. I don't think. I don't hope so. I hope that they are a bit more universal than that.
But why do you say I don't hope so?
Because it was not my intention.
Ah, okay, then.
There's nothing wrong with people who do write with this intention, but it was not my intention. So, and The Guard is a story which could take place in any large Western city. So, and if I think about it, I never use references to. No, I don't.
So do you
Well, my last book was in Monte Carlo. That I couldn't escape that reference. So, but not in Flanders, no.
But again, it's quite far away from home.
It doesn't matter really. It's about the characters and saying that I realize there must be something. There must be something typically Flemish about it somehow, because I was born there and I was raised there and I lived there. So, but it's in between the lines. It's not explicit. It's not meant to be. But I cannot judge, and I'm not the person to answer the question. Really, you should ask somebody who can read it with more distance and can tell. Look, he must be from Flanders.
But you hope nobody will be
well
able to do that.
No, I want to be incognito.
As a writer?
As a writer, yes.
Or as a Flemish writer?
Especially as a Flemish writer. Yes.
Ricardo, you mentioned a few German authors you like, you feel, what do you feel with them? Would you call it? Love. In love? Oh. But is Goethe and Ricardo, is that a love story? Or?
No, for me Goethe is kind of marble. It's like a statue. It's too big and it's too far from me, I think. In fact, in my text, I try to not to make a joke, but I used a previous joke of another writer that I love, who is Thomas Berger. And a very beautiful short story of Thomas Berger, which title is Goethe dies. Goethe script, don't know the Dutch translation. Berger says that the last words of Goethe were not Mehr Licht, more light, but Mehr Nicht, more nothing. And I think it's a very clever option, because I think between these two words, the light and the nothing, the light and the darkness, is where the writer works. So I try to use this joke of Berger like a metaphor, like allegory of the work, of the job of the writer.
Two writers, Annette Paint. She's a German writer and a literary critic. She lives in Freiburg, and 3 of her novels have been translated into Dutch. The most recent one is Als jij goud zegt, is het goud. It has been translated by John Breeschoten. Annette Paint, where are you? Yes, there you are. And Jaroslav. Yes, you're very in the dark there. Please come over here. Jaroslav, you are a Czech writer. You are a journalist as well, a musician. You write novels, theater plays. You write in German and in Czech. And maybe you can explain to us later on what you are writing in German and when you choose to write in Czech. Sky under Berlin is one of your titles, From Ende des Punks in Helsinki. Beautiful title, wonderful title. Grand Hotel, Stille in Prague. And you have also published a graphic novel, Alois Nebel. Okay. Earlier on, we heard Ricardo and others say, well, I'm feeling an outsider. All writers are, in a way, feeling aliens. I am incognito in my country. That's also a negative way of defining what a writer is. How do you feel about this kind of definition of a writer? Are you feeling the same, or could you find me a positive definition? Annette?
Well, Ricardo, I knew exactly what you meant. I can really very much relate to that, because when I write, I mean, of course, I use my language, which is me being part of the community and the tradition and everything. But it sounds too big, but it's a lonely process, and it's very difficult to sort of feel yourself to be in a community. Also, if you're not sort of considered mainstream, you know, if you maybe just write your own very weird stuff, you're not sort of welcomed warmly maybe by the literary community. That can actually also create a feeling of being an outsider. And I myself, I'm also interested in outsiders as figures in my texts. So, and I like to meet other writers. You know, there is a sense of bonding, but I don't. When I write, during the act of writing, I don't feel connected, so to say. I feel, okay, I'm on my own here, and I have to do it again, and I'll try. This sounds kind of heroic, which I don't really mean, but so I think I know. Maybe that's not how you meant it, but that's how I feel about it. And I definitely don't believe in handling definitions when I write, or you know, or sort of explicit concepts. Writing doesn't work like that. It works in detail with language, and for me, not so much with contents and concepts.
Isn't it in a way impossible not to be an outsider when you're a writer? Don't you? In other words, doesn't any writer need to be a kind of an alien?
Ja und nein.
Explain them. The ja and then the nein.
I think when you write, you're quite alone, but in the same moment you are not alone, because there are like these stories and these dialogues and these outsiders, which I also prefer as my literary heroes, or the people who I'm interesting in. But I think I don't want to complain about it, because it's just great that there are some people who want to read like our books, or my books, still at a time where they can do lots of other things, that there are still a couple of people, lots of people actually, who buy books and who want or read the books. In Czech Republic, it's not easy to survive as a writer. We are quite small country, small literature. It was like 100 years ago the same. Also, even for Kafka was working in the insurance company. Lots of writers were journalists, or they were just simple workers. So actually, maybe still it is like the best time now for the Czech literature. There are a few more who can live from their writing, because their books are translated to the German, or into the Polish, or into the Dutch, if they are very lucky. They are then happy. So now it's much more easier to be a writer actually than it was maybe 100 or 80 years ago, I think. Maybe in part.
Thank you both very, very much for this conversation.
Famous last words, more light, Mehr Licht. Someone who is here is Janos Bodnar. He comes from Hungary. He works as a journalist there. He works as a writer, as a publisher, as a photo editor of a number of magazines in Hungary. He has written 2 books on a photographer and a Kertész, and he's at this moment working on a book on a few Hungarian photographers. Where are you, Janos? Upstairs. For someone who writes a lot about photography, to write about Goethe's last words, Mehr Licht, more light, the perfect subject.
Das, sehr wichtig ist, dass ich wollte nicht einen Mythos zerstören. Also ich finde, Goethe ist die größte, was es gibt. Ein heiliges Mensch. Aber
ein Heiliger?
Heilig, ein Saint.
Ja, Heiliger, ja.
Und Aber es sind einige Sachen, was er also nicht gut wusste. Und in meinem Brief, was also Herr Goethe mir geschrieben hat,
You've written a letter.
Is it a letter?
He has written a letter actually to you.
Yes,
Let Goethe write a letter to you.
Schreibt mir den Brief. Und in diesem Brief sind Sachen, also alles ist Wahrheit, also keine Lüge. Sind Sachen, was noch in dem Goethes Leben konnte man wussten, dass nicht genau so ist. Und dann später natürlich sind Sachen, was schon sicher nicht so sind, wie er geglaubt hat. Trotzdem, er ist der größte europäische Schriftsteller, was ist. Aber also diese Probleme zusammenhängen mit dem Problem, was ist Wahrheit und was ist nicht Wahrheit, was ist ein bisschen Wahrheit. Also mit diesem Problem. Und kann man sagen, dass das nicht war, dass er mir geschrieben hat. Aber ich bin nicht sicher, dass das alles, was in diesem Brief ist, das konnte man von Goethe kommen.
You let him, for example, speak about his Farbenlehre.
Yeah.
He didn't just want to be a writer, but also wanted to be a scientist, and he wrote numerous books about colors, the working of colors, but how nature functions. In almost all these cases, he was wrong afterwards.
Yes, ich schreibe darüber, aber auch ist eine Selbstkritik, was Herr Goethe schreibt mir, wo genau beschreibt das war ein Unsinn, also nicht Unsinn, wie ist das, ein Fehler, was das geglaubt hat, dass das die bestes Werk war, was er geschrieben hat. Und das noch Goethe hat geschrieben, also nicht ich, sondern Goethe hat geschrieben, dass die Farbenlehre war die wichtigste Sache, was er gemacht hat. Und das jetzt finde ich einen Unsinn, weil das nicht war, also das konnte man wissen.
And you let him say that he was wrong after.
Ja, aber das grundsätzlich auch Goethe hat geschrieben, dass das ist ein Krieg zwischen Dunkel und Licht. Licht und Dunkel, ja, das ist ein Krieg, wie sagt man das denn?
Light is a war between,
ja,
between
und das bedeutet, dass der Farbenlehre, auch im Brief beschreibt er mir, das ist eine Goethe-Lehre, also das nicht eine wissenschaftliche Sache, sondern das Leben von Goethe, eine symbolische Sache.
There is some kind of tragedy in that, isn't it? That you think that the best work you did, the best work you wrote, is the scientific works you wrote, instead of these poems or the Faust or Werther or his other works.
Ob ich das gelesen habe?
Nein, das ist eine.
Habe ich gelesen.
Ja, selbstverständlich. Das ist eine Art persönliche Tragödie für ihn ist, dass er geglaubt hat, dass seine Farbenlehre so gut war, dass es zumindest seine Werke gehört.
Ich finde das nicht traurig, sondern weil meiner Meinung nach er war glücklich. Also das
ist auch etwas Schönes drin, dass man das glaubt.
Möglicherweise er war ein bisschen traurig, dass das die Leute nicht verstehen, aber besonders nicht.
Schon ein paar Mal diesen Abend haben Leute gesagt, dass Goethe aus Marmor gemacht ist. Also dass man kein persönliches Band mit ihm haben kann. Wie ist es bei ihm?
Was hat er gemacht?
Dass er aus Marmor ist, dass er
ich verstehe.
Ein Heiliger, dass man nicht einfach zu ihm zutreten kann, dass man nicht.
Ich finde nicht eine Marmorfigur, oder wie sagt man das, ich finde Goethe, Punkt vor. T.S. Eliot, Name wissen Sie, dass hat der 50er Jahre in Hamburg auf einer Goethe-Preis Vorlesung war, ich weiß nicht genau, und hat geschrieben, dass er
damn day begins. For them, a damn day begins. Wherever you may be, you won't escape. It would be best of all to stay where you are.